Biology, the science of life in living organisms. Sounds fun, right? Maybe, maybe not, but as a student who has taken this course, I will admit that there is a lot of information that can be overwhelming for some. This is why today I have decided to create Grade 11 Biology in a nutshell. We will be covering 3 important units: diversity of living things, genetics, and animals' structure and function. So, let's get to it. Diversity of living things. From the previous years of science, we learned that there is lots of life around us, and in grade 11, we look into how we can classify these organisms, the different kingdoms, the importance of diversity, and a special exception called viruses. First, there are 7 characteristics that make up living things on our planets and have in common. We have the cellular organization, which can either be unicellular or multicellular, reproduction, which can be asexual or sexual, metabolism, which helps us become energized and can either go through a process of anabolism, catabolism, or metabolism, homeostasis, which allows us to be in an equilibrium state in different conditions, responsiveness to the things around us, growth and development, and evolution. When classifying these organisms, we call this study taxonomy, and it is great for identifying relationships among organisms. Organisms are assigned in taxes, ranging from the largest taxi, our kingdoms, to the phylum, class, order, family, genus, and lastly species. There are also great tools in order to identify organisms, such as the dichotomous key, which is a series of branching 2-part statements. From here, we can also look at the evolutionary relatedness among species, otherwise known as phylogeny. Tools such as a cladogram or a phylogenetic tree show us the evolution of certain species and their traits over a period of time, with the earlier evolved traits at the bottom to the most recent at the top. We can also look at the structure of different animals. There are homologous structures where 2 organisms have a similar origin but different function, and analogous structures where 2 animals have the same function but different origin. Now, as mentioned before, the kingdoms are the largest taxi, and there are 6 of them which organisms can be classified to: Archaebacteria, Eubacteria, Animalia, Fungi, Plantae, and Protista. Starting off with our bacteria, Archaebacteria and Eubacteria are the kingdoms where prokaryotic organisms, which are heterotrophs and autotrophs, are classified in. Prokaryotic organisms are unicellular organisms with no membrane-bound organelles or a nucleus. Though both share very similar qualities, a huge difference between the two is that Archaebacteria are known to be more toxic and live in toxic areas with harsh weather, while Eubacteria are known for being more harmless and even called the true bacteria. Next, we have Animalia, which are organisms that are multicellular eukaryotes that are heterotroph. Animalia is known for being the most diverse kingdom, where animals are, and can do many things such as reproduce sexually like most, and asexually by ripping parts of their limbs off. This is only the case for lower animals. Fungi are eukaryotic, unicellular, and multicellular heterotrophic organisms and are known for being important decomposers and recyclers in our ecosystem. There are 3 types of fungi, which are zygomycota, which are case-like fungi such as bread mold, ascomycota, which are sac-like fungi such as yeast, and basidiomycota, which are club-like fungi such as mushrooms. Next, Kingdom Plantae is where all our beloved plants are and have organisms that are eukaryotic autotrophs, meaning they can produce their own food by photosynthesis. In this kingdom, there are 4 different plant groups ranging from the simplest plant form, the pyrophytes, to the pteridophytes, gymnosperms, and lastly, the angiosperms. Organisms in the kingdom Plantae also have a mycorrhizal relationship with fungi, as plants help fungi gain water and nutrients, while fungi helps plants get additional moisture and nutrition. Lastly, we have our most difficult to classify kingdom, Protista. This kingdom is one of the most interesting because it is known for being a junk drawer for organisms who do not fit under the fungi, Plantae, or Animalia kingdom, but they share certain traits of them, meaning they can be unicellular or multicellular, autotrophs or heterotrophs, they live in moist environments, and they are eukaryotes. There can be fungi-like protists such as slime molds, plant-like protists such as algae, and animal-like protists such as amoebas. Thanks to these organisms, it can create biodiversity, which is the variety of life on Earth and is the reason why we are more resilient to change. There are many different types of diversity that make up biodiversity, such as species diversity, the variety and abundance of species in an area, genetic diversity, which is all of the different forms of genes in a species, and structural diversity, which is the range of sizes and shapes in an area. Biodiversity helps us adapt to change as our world is constantly evolving, and without it, can lead to very dire consequences such as a threat to food supply, a loss of natural medicine, an impact on tourism, and a disruption on biogeochemical cycles such as the carbon and water cycle. Now, there's one other group that we haven't talked about because they differ from everything else, and these are called viruses. See, with viruses, something that makes them stand out is that they are non-living, yet they still play a huge role in our lives and have some characteristics of life, such as reproduction. Viruses don't have any cellular structure or its own metabolism, so it must find other ways to reproduce. Therefore, they are called robot hackers, as viruses are the exception which can reproduce by sneaking into larger cells with organelles and take over. There are two cycles in which a virus can reproduce: the lytic cycle and the lysogenic cycle. The lytic cycle is where the virus injects nucleic acid into the host cell, which will duplicate as the cell reproduces, making the virus spread. DNA viruses such as warts and chickenpox follow the lytic cycle and are known for being less severe. On the contrary, we have the lysogenic cycle, where viruses use the host cell to create more viruses, which transports them into the lytic cycle and causes the host cell to burst out, releasing the viruses into the body. RNA viruses such as AIDS, rabies, and measles follow this cycle and are much more severe than DNA viruses. Genetics. Now in grade 10, you may remember mitosis, or cell division, where cells undergo 5 phases of division: prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase, aka PMAT, and cytokinesis. In grade 11, we touch on meiosis, the division of sex cells or gametes. Meiosis is known for being a reduction division, as you start with 46 chromosomes and end with 23 in the egg and sperm, as opposed to mitosis where you end with 46 chromosomes. In contrast to mitosis, meiosis goes through 2 sets of division, meaning 2 prophases, 2 metaphases, 2 anaphases, and 2 telophases. Now we like to divide these 2 phases into PMAT1 and PMAT2. So starting at phase 1, in meiosis, like mitosis, your chromosomes will condense in prophase 1. However, chromosomes will line up with one similar to them called homologous chromosomes and cross genetic info with each other. From there, the rest of phase 1 is very similar to mitosis, as you have the chromosomes in the middle in metaphase 1, the pulling away in anaphase 1, and the 2 formed nuclei in telophase 1. However, your cell is not split yet, as you still have 46 chromosomes. This is where phase 2 or PMAT2 occurs. In prophase 2, your spindle fibers form again. In metaphase 2, your chromosomes will line up in the middle, but in anaphase 2, your chromatids will pull away. This allows there to be 23 chromosomes in telophase, and where you have 4 new cells which are split in cytokinesis. Now, in some cases, there may be abnormal meiosis, a failure of homologous chromosomes to separate cell and meiosis. There is monosomy, where the daughter cell is missing a chromosome, and trisomy, where the daughter cell has an extra chromosome, and this leads to genetic disorders such as Down syndrome. Now, you may be wondering, why does this matter? Well, this is because it leads to our next topic, inheritance. Traits are passed down and come from the genes of our parents, and we have the possibility of inheriting either a recessive or dominant genes from the alleles, which are alternatives of a gene on the same location, and determines our genotype. Our genes that are in our chromosomes relates to our physical appearance and even our sex. And karyotyping, an organized profile of a person's chromosomes, is what helps us identify these features. We inherit one gamete from each parent and can result in a homozygous genotype where both gametes are dominant or recessive, or heterozygous, where one gamete is dominant and one is recessive. When we inherit a dominant trait, it will always be expressed over the recessive trait unless we have a homozygous recessive gene where there is no dominant alleles present. All of this information of inheritance is thanks to this man, Gregor Mendel, the father of genetics, and this all started in the 19th century when Mendel decided to experiment on pea plants to identify the patterns of inheritance in the offspring. He discovered that in each offspring, you were able to predict the genotypes and phenotypes based on the parent's genotype. Now the offspring is referred to as the F1 or filial generation, and it is hybrid as it is a result of two different homozygous traits. As he continued to crossbreed, the ratios of the genotype and phenotype became more complex. This is where we use Punnett squares, which is a great tool in determining the possible genotypes and phenotypes. You can use Punnett squares for monohybrid crosses, dihybrid crosses, codominance, incomplete dominance, sex-linked inheritance, and multiple alleles. Starting off with the hybrid crosses, monohybrid crosses refer to the inheritance between one trait, such as eye color, while dihybrid crosses show the inheritance between two traits, which can be eye color and hair color. Next, codominance is where both alleles of a trait are dominant, meaning that they are both present in the offspring. Incomplete dominance is where traits are not fully dominant or recessive. There is sex-linked inheritance, where certain traits are passed on depending on the sex of the parent carrying it. They can either be located on the X chromosome, making them X-linked, or on the Y chromosome, making them Y-linked. However, X-linked traits are more common as the X chromosome is bigger. A great example of an X-linked trait is hemophilia, and are more commonly in males as they only have one X chromosome, meaning that any other recessive gene on the X chromosome will always be expressed. This is different for females, however, as they have two X chromosomes, so it's more likely for them to be a carrier rather than actually having it. And lastly, multiple alleles are when you have more than 3 alleles on a specific gene, and a great example of this is your blood type, where you could either be type A, B, or O. Animals, structure, and function. As a recall from grade 10, you may remember some of the systems we looked at, such as the excretory, respiratory, circulatory, digestive, and nervous system. Today, we will be going more in depth on the digestive, circulatory, and respiratory system. First off, we have the digestive system, and this is where, you guessed it, we digest our food. Its main function is to break down food into smaller particles that can absorb into the circulatory system and then be excreted. There are 4 stages in this system: ingestion, the intake of food; digestion, the breakdown of food; absorption, transporting digested food into the circulatory system; and excretion, the removal of undigested food. Ingestion and digestion starts at the mouth, where teeth break down the entered food and is pushed back to the pharynx or the throat, with the help of saliva that forms a ball of the crushed and softened food. In the mouth, there are 2 types of digestion occurring: chemical and mechanical. Chemical digestion is from our saliva, which includes enzymes that allow us to break down nutrients such as carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. Mechanical digestion is the physical breakdown of our nutrients, which is what our teeth are for. Next, we have our esophagus, which is a pipe that transports food from the mouth to our stomach. At our stomach, this is where some absorption takes place, and the stomach contracts and relaxes, massaging the broken down food. After the food goes down to our small intestine, this is where digestion and absorption take place and have 3 parts. Meanwhile, any digested food goes down to the large intestine, where the semi-liquid food turns into solid waste and is prompted to excrete. Lastly, we have the rectum and anus, where the feces are stored and then pushed out of the body. In the digestive system, we also have accessory organs such as the liver, which produces bile, the pancreas, which produces sodium bicarbonate to help digest nutrients, and the gallbladder, which stores the bile. The respiratory system. As we know, most organisms are aerobic, meaning they require oxygen. The respiratory system allows oxygen to enter our cells and allow carbon dioxide to leave, also called gas exchange. The system starts at the nasal cavity, where it filters the entering air. The air goes through the larynx, which connects the nose and mouth, and through the pharynx and trachea. The larynx also has a barrier called the epiglottis, which helps prevent food and drinks from passing through. The trachea or windpipe conducts air from the larynx into the bronchi, which are connected to each lung. The bronchi contains bronchioles, which connect the bronchi to the alveoli, a grape-like structure with air sacs, where gas exchange occurs. From the bronchi, we have the lungs, which are soft spongy organs that include cilia, which move debris out of airways, and pleural membrane, which cushions the lungs and reduces friction. Lastly, we have the diaphragm, which is the muscle below the lungs that move when we're breathing. When we breathe, our entire system is being used. Inspiration or inhaling is where air flows into the lungs, which cause the diaphragm to move down, the ribcage to increase in volume, decrease in pressure, and for air to rush in. In contrast, expiration or exhaling is where air flows out of the lungs, which causes the diaphragm to move up, ribcage to decrease in volume, increase in pressure, and air to rush out. Lastly, the circulatory system. The circulatory system circulates blood to deliver water, nutrients, and oxygen, and remove carbon dioxide, heat, and other waste from our body. In here, blood vessels form two circulatory pathways. The pulmonary circuit, which carries deoxygenized blood to the lungs and brings back oxygenated blood, and the systemic circuit, which brings oxygenated blood to the body and deoxygenated blood back to the heart. We have our arteries, which carry blood away from the heart, our veins, which carry blood toward the heart, and capillaries, which connect our arteries and veins. Our accessory organ in the circulatory system is the spleen, which filters blood as part of the immune system and is located under the ribcage. So, there it is. Grade 11 biology in a nutshell. Wasn't so bad now, was it? Obviously, if you want to learn more about this course, I would recommend actually taking it, as it goes further in depth on the whys and hows, but I hope that this video gives you a general understanding of the importance of each concept. So thank you for watching and have a great day.